After his girlfriend becomes the victim of a monstrous crime, a young man is given supernatural powers and decides to use them to find and punish the real culprit. Today we're going to recap the story of the 2013 movie, Horns. Iggy and Marin were a young couple in love who had been together since they were teenagers. However, after Marin brutally lost her life, her boyfriend became the prime suspect in the crime. Although he wasn't arrested, Iggy was hated by everyone in his town and began to be harassed by numerous reporters who tried to intimidate him into telling his side of the story. As his house is always under siege, the young man often runs away to his parents' house in search of a little peace and quiet. However, when he gets there, he has to deal with the judgment of his family who, despite being willing to help him get out of prison, also believe that Iggy is the perpetrator of the crime. Terry, his older brother, says that he will be by the young man's side no matter what happens and guarantees that he will help him through this extremely difficult time. The only one who believes in Iggy's innocence is his best friend, Lee. The young man is also a lawyer and, thanks to his work, managed to get him out of jail. However, when the two friends meet up, Iggy discovers that the forensics laboratory where Marin's body was taken has just been set on fire and all the samples have been destroyed. As a result, it will now be even more difficult to prove the young man's innocence. In addition, the police have obtained a new statement from an anonymous witness, who claims to have seen Iggy dragging his girlfriend into a car on the night of the murder. After being bombarded by this news, the young man goes to the pub where his childhood friend works. Glenna was always in love with Iggy, but he never had eyes for any other girl than Marin. Now that the young woman is gone, she tries to get close to him, but he shows no interest in her friend. That evening, Marin's father and some of her acquaintances go to the place where she perished to pay their respects. At that moment, Iggy hides in a treehouse while drinking a bottle of whiskey. He knows he's not welcome there, as Dale also holds him responsible for his daughter's elimination. When everyone leaves, the young man begins to destroy the images of saints left in the place, but Glenna appears to stop him. Marin went to church every Sunday and always carried a cross around her neck, but that didn't stop her from being eliminated in such a cruel way, which leaves Iggy completely disgusted with God. So, in this moment of fragility, Glenna tries to console her friend and they end up sleeping together. The next morning, when he wakes up, Iggy notices that horns are starting to grow on his forehead and asks Glenna if she can see them too. Under the influence of supernatural powers, the young woman begins to confess her darkest thoughts while devouring a box of donuts. When he discovers that this is not just a figment of his imagination, Iggy goes to a doctor for help and sits down at the reception desk to fill out a form. Meanwhile, a bratty child starts screaming and scattering all the toys around the waiting room. Desperate at not being able to control her daughter, the woman sitting next to Iggy reveals that her real desire is to leave that spoiled little girl right there and walk away. Frightened, the young man walks away and the receptionist asks Mary to take her daughter away, because no one can stand to hear her scream anymore. The girl then approaches Iggy and reveals that she hates her mother. When he is finally seen, the young man hears the nurse say that she is being betrayed by her boyfriend and doesn't understand why everyone around him is revealing their secrets to him. When he enters the office, the doctor informs him that he will have to saw off those horns and Iggy needs to be sedated for the procedure. As he sleeps, he remembers the day he saw Marin for the first time at church. They exchanged a few glances during the service and, before leaving, the young man found the necklace she had forgotten in the pew. When he was young, Iggy used to go out partying with his group of friends and thought it would be fun to use firecrackers to blow things up. One day, they were playing by the beach when Eric challenged him to go down the ramp in a shopping trolley. Despite Glenna's pleas not to do so, the young man decided to accept the challenge, but ended up falling into the sea and getting stuck. Seeing his friend in danger, Lee quickly jumped in to rescue him and, just barely, Iggy was saved. That afternoon, Lee fixed Marin's crucifix so that the young man could give it to the girl. That day, the two began to grow closer and never parted again. During a conversation, the young man discovered that Marin's mother had perished of cancer the previous year, and so the young woman had moved to that small town with her father. As they grew closer, Iggy decided to take the girl to see a house he found in the middle of the forest and it became their favorite place. When he wakes up, the young man discovers that his horns have not been torn off and decides to leave, his last option being to ask Father Mold for help. When he sees him, the old man is frightened and says that there is nothing he can do to rid the young man of the curse, because, according to him, the young man is being punished by God. Not knowing where to turn, Iggy goes to talk to his friend and discovers that Lee can't see his horns. He therefore comes to the conclusion that good people can't see them. While visiting his parents' house, the young man meets his mother and discovers terrible things about her. Lydia says she's tired of listening to her son's problems and can't stand the sight of him any longer. When he finds out that the woman is unhappy in his presence, Iggy decides to leave and ends up bumping into his father on the way to the door. At that moment, Derek reveals that he hates his son for what he did to Marin, because the girl was the best part of Iggy's life. Despite this, the man had the forensics laboratory where the young woman's body was set on fire to get him out of jail, because he feels duty-bound to protect his son. At this point, Iggy decides to use his powers to find out who eliminated Marin and make him confess to his crime. He immediately gets into his car and drives to the pub in the hope of getting a lead. However, as usual, he is followed by countless reporters. When he is questioned about his involvement in the crime, the young man suggests that the journalists start a battle to decide who will do an exclusive interview with him. At that moment, a great war breaks out and, while the people are fighting each other, Iggy enters the pub with the aim of finding out who the anonymous witness is who gave the false statement to the police. After talking to the customers, he gets his answer and returns to the car, where he finds the engagement ring he intended to give Marin the night she was eliminated. Only Lee and Terry knew about the surprise and they were supposed to show up at the diner to celebrate when the girl accepted the proposal. However, when the couple met, Marin said she was moving to Los Angeles and didn't want to continue her relationship with Iggy. At this point, a waitress went to the table to take their order, but decided to come back another time when she realized that the couple were in the middle of a serious conversation. While they were arguing, Iggy began to believe that his girlfriend was in love with another man and therefore wanted to end the relationship. Not knowing what to say, Marin got up and left. Soon after, Iggy also left the diner and found his brother. Furious, he got into his car and drove aimlessly until he found a quiet place to park. The next morning, Iggy is found by the police and Eric wonders when he last saw Marin. At this point, the young man became frightened and asked what had happened to the girl. After that, he became the main suspect in the crime. In an attempt to question the anonymous witness, the young man returns to the diner where he intended to propose to his girlfriend and asks Veronica why she lied to the police about seeing him drag Marin into the car before leaving. The woman then claims that she doesn't regret what she did and says that she gave a false statement with the aim of becoming famous and finally being noticed by the media. After discovering the truth, Iggy goes to the restaurant where his brother works as a musician and, after the show, calls Terry for a chat. The young man then tells him that he has found out who the anonymous witness is and asks his brother to go to the police station to give a statement. After all, he was also there in the cafeteria and saw Iggy leave on his own. Just then, Terry tells him that he gave Marin a lift home that night. On hearing this, Iggy is furious and attacks his brother. Induced by the power of those horns, the musician says that he offered to take the young woman home and, on the way, Marin decided to get out of the car. He tried to get her back into the vehicle, but she said she needed to go to the treehouse, so Terry decided to wait for her there. As he was drunk, he ended up falling asleep and the next morning, when he woke up, he found a bloodstained stone on the driver's seat. Worried, Terry went into the woods to look for Marin and found her lifeless next to a tree. Afraid of what might happen if he called the police, the musician decided to get rid of all the evidence that could link him to the crime and didn't tell anyone about what happened that day. Suddenly, the police show up and Iggy is arrested. However, the next morning, Lee manages to get his friend out of jail once again and, while they're talking, the young man realizes that he's wearing Marin's crucifix. When he is unmasked, Lee tells him that the young woman gave him the necklace as a present. Iggy then discovers that his best friend is the guy his girlfriend was in love with and that's why they broke up. After discovering the truth, Iggy drives to his ex-father-in-law's house while blaming himself for never having suspected the betrayal. When he finds Dale, he asks if Marin has said anything about being in love with someone else, but the man is furious and orders Iggy to leave. Like all the other inhabitants of the town, Dale also believes that the young man has eliminated his daughter, but he doesn't have the courage to punish him with his own hands. Even after losing his entire family, the man remains a good person and can't even see the horns on Iggy's head. That night, the young man hides in an abandoned building and tries his best to remove those bizarre horns. While banging his head on a concrete wall, he realizes that the place is infested with snakes and they are all crawling towards him. Iggy immediately grabs a piece of wood to defend himself, but soon discovers that the snakes don't want to hurt him. Instead, one of the animals climbs onto the young man's arm and positions itself around his neck like a pet. At that moment, Iggy is seized by an even stronger desire for revenge against all those who have wronged him and the waitress becomes his first victim. After closing up the store, Veronica gets into her car and touches up her lipstick before starting off. What she doesn't realize is that the vehicle is full of snakes, which unite in an attack and start biting her all over. In an attempt to escape, the woman gets out of the car and spots Iggy, who makes it clear why she is being punished. Soon after, he drives to his brother's house and sits in an armchair while watching Terry use all kinds of illicit substances. The musician says he's having trouble staying sober since Marin perished, so Iggy figures out the best way to punish him. The young man uses his powers to force his brother to ingest all those substances at once. His aim is not to eliminate Terry, but to make him fall into a coma and suffer everything Marin has suffered with nowhere to run. When the toxins start to take effect in his body, Terry has frightening hallucinations and becomes desperate, having to confront all his greatest fears. Finally, Iggy arranges a meeting with Lee and asks how long he and Marin have been having an affair. The young man says that they were together for a few months, but when the young woman was eliminated, he knew that Iggy was innocent. Otherwise, he would never have helped his friend get out of prison. Upon hearing this, the young man gives up on punishing Lee, as he believes he is a good person and wasn't planning to betray him. However, before he leaves, Iggy rips Marin's necklace off his friend's neck, at which point Lee sees his horns. Then he realizes that his girlfriend's crucifix was what was protecting Lee, and, now that the young man no longer has the necklace, Iggy can use his new powers to interrogate him. So Iggy forces him to tell him everything that happened and discovers that it was he who eliminated Marin. The truth is that Lee has always been in love with the girl and regrets saving his friend's life when they were children. The man believes that if the young man had drowned, he would have won Marin's heart. On hearing this, Iggy grabs Lee's neck and manages to access his memories. A few hours before being proposed to, the young woman called Lee for a chat and told him that she had recently discovered something about herself that would prevent her from continuing her relationship with Iggy. She then asked Lee to go to the cafeteria later, as she would need her friend's support when she ended the relationship. However, when he saw Marin leaving in Terry's car, he decided to follow them and went into the forest in search of the young woman. When he found her, he tried to take her home, but Marin said she needed to be alone. As she cried over the end of their relationship, Lee kissed her and told her she didn't need to hide her feelings any longer. The young man was convinced that Marin had broken up with Iggy because she was in love with him, but the girl claims that she has always loved her boyfriend and has never had eyes for Lee. At that moment, Lee gets up and strikes his friend. The young man says that after he discovered that the feelings he had had for Marin for so many years were not reciprocated, he was blinded by hatred and attacked her with a rock. He then stole her crucifix and put the blood-stained stone in Terry's car so that he could be charged with the girl's perishment. After being hit several times by the man he considered his best friend, Iggy falls unconscious and Lee puts him back in his car. His plan is to tell the police that his friend felt guilty about the crime he had committed and, after confessing that he was responsible for Marin elimination, decided to take his own life. After pouring a few liters of fuel over the young man's body, Lee sets the car on fire and Iggy accelerates the vehicle, causing it to end up in the ocean. Hours later, the authorities are informed of the criminal's perishment and Iggy's parents receive the news while they are with Terry in hospital. However, that night, the young man manages to escape alive and, after getting out of the water, decides to pay another visit to his former father-in-law. On seeing him, Dale is surprised to discover that Iggy is still alive and finally believes him when he says that he didn't eliminate Marin. At that moment, the man invites his former son-in-law into his house and hands him a key that the girl had left for him. As a thank you, Iggy gives the crucifix to Dale and discovers that the necklace actually belonged to Marin's mother. However, Dale knows that his daughter would like Iggy to keep the crucifix, so he decides to give it back to the young man. After putting the cord around his neck, the young man loses his demonic appearance and even his horns disappear. He then goes to the treehouse and uses the key to open the hiding place that only he and Marin knew about. Inside, Iggy finds a box where the young woman had kept some objects, including a letter written in Morse code. When he reads it, he discovers that his girlfriend already knew she was going to perish soon. The young woman dreamed of building a family with Iggy, but as she was very ill, she knew that would never happen. Marin had recently discovered that she had cancer, the same cancer that took her mother's life. When she was still a child, she saw all the suffering her father went through and didn't want Iggy to suffer like that. Marin's biggest fear was that her boyfriend would give up his future to take care of her, so she decided to push him away because she knew there was no possibility of a cure for her illness. After reading that letter, Iggy decides to pay Terry a visit and reveals that it was Lee who eliminated Marin. When he hears this, the man says that he will help his brother get revenge, but Iggy knows that he is still in no condition to leave the hospital. So the young man goes to Lee's house alone and realizes that the man doesn't remember what happened while he was under the effect of the horn's powers. Then Iggy invites him for a walk in the woods and takes his old friend to the scene of the crime. At this point, Lee realizes that he has been unmasked and tries to convince Iggy that he is innocent. However, the young man has already heard his confession and knows very well that it's all just an act. His real desire is to punish Lee by taking his life, but Iggy decides to do the right thing and gives him the chance to turn himself into the police. Just then, Eric and Terry show up and the policeman pulls a gun on Lee. Eric has just discovered that the young man lied about Iggy taking his own life, so he becomes the main suspect in the crime. Now that he's surrounded, Lee realizes he has no choice but to give himself up and once again manages to trick everyone around him into stealing the rifle from Eric's hands and using it to shoot Terry. When Iggy tries to take the gun, Lee ends up blowing the policeman's head off and threatens to eliminate the musician if he tries to approach him. Realizing that his brother's life is at risk, Iggy removes the crucifix from his neck and a pair of wings appears on his back. However, when he begins to fly, his wings burst into flames and his entire body is incinerated. At that moment, Iggy transforms completely into a demonic creature and Lee shoots at the monster until he runs out of bullets. Despite being hit several times, the demon remains standing and the criminal kneels down to ask for his forgiveness. Even after everything that has happened, Iggy still feels compassion for his old friend and, once again, ends up being betrayed. At the first opportunity, Lee hits the young man in the knee with his rifle and uses a trident to pierce his abdomen. As he bleeds, Iggy attacks his opponent and pierces his body with his horn. He then throws him away and watches as Lee is attacked by countless snakes. While the young man is immobilized, a snake invades his mouth and destroys all his organs. After completing his revenge, Iggy surrenders to his wounds and is supported by Terry, who holds his hand as he watches his brother's body fade to charcoal. Now that he has fulfilled his mission on Earth, the young man in love can go and meet his beloved so that they can be together for eternity. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.